Friends, joining me right now is someone you've seen on TV with me. His name is Randy Naidoo, Naidoo, MD. He is a pediatrician, but not your average pediatrician. Thank you for sitting down with us. We did some television programming today, and everybody here is just a buzz. I mean, what you're doing in this huge pediatric center, wellness center, is different than I think I or other people feel a pediatrician office is. You talk about integrative pediatrics. Tell me what that means.
It really speaks to how we think about the infant when they enter our doors, what potentially even the family did before they even had their baby, thinking about the context of their social, nutritional environment, the toxins that may have been they've been exposed to. It's having a much deeper conversation about vaccinations and really not looking at the schedule, but looking at vaccines in the context of each child and how that child is coming in for each of their wellness appointments. If they're not well, that might not be the time to do a lot with vaccines, but when they're well, maybe that is a time that we can look at doing a vaccine. And we like to try to move vaccines and spread them out. One of the big things that I learned over the years is that we may have a lot of adults who assume that they have protection from vaccines that they got when they were children, but they don't have that protection now. So maybe learning how to spread things out allows that individual to have much better protection when they're an adult. I think the nutritional part is a huge part in integrative medicine. We kind of talked about that as well, but how you stage that out at each part of development, from the nursing to attempting the solid foods, to understanding where families need to shop and get their food from, where's the right sources for those foods, that plays a role in the integrative arena. And then it's the huge amount of training that happens after residency or for nurse practitioners or physician assistants after they're done with their training, where you're trying to complement not only what you've learned in the traditional sense, but then all of the hours that you spend maybe going to conferences or taking classes to learn about all of the other aspects of treatment that are not just what you're taught in residency and medical school.
You know, a case in point, we have a friend who is the headmaster of a Christian school out in the Austin area. And she told me one day, Doug, I can walk into a classroom and know which kid was up last night gaming, screen time, and which aren't. Do you see that in a practice? I mean, you're keen on stuff like that. You
Absolutely.
You read that way.
I mean, probably one of the biggest travesties that I'm seeing right now is children's posture. You see children now that play so much gaming that the musculoskeletal system is very, it almost looks like somebody who's elderly.
Yeah.
And so we have a generation of children that are coming through the pipeline right now that probably will not have a very sturdy musculoskeletal system as they go into adulthood.
Because they're leaning forward in the car
and they're sitting down, and school is very sedentary. One of the things that I would love to see is schools be able to modify classrooms so children can move around while they're learning, or have stand-up desk instead of the sit-down desk. That would be a great change to how kids learn.
You will see pregnant women maybe in their third trimester looking for pediatricians, interview and so forth. And if they accept your practice, which has a lot of nurses and doctors in it, if they accept your practice, you might follow these kids until adolescence.
Or into college. We have children who are in graduate school. In our special needs population, this is another travesty that's kind of occurring in medicine, is that when we have children that have autism or other really neurodevelopmental or neurodevastated type of injuries, these children, when they graduate out from their pediatrician, which usually most pediatricians will maybe see a patient up to 18 years of age, these patients don't have anywhere to go. They don't have that next kind of step or that next physician who kind of has an expertise in taking care of these neurodevelopmental disorders. You know, autism has really been on the rise in the past probably 20, 25 years.
Why?
So,
what's your take on that?
There's a lot that goes into it. I think the agricultural practices, the stripping of different minerals from the soil, the inundation again of so many vaccines. I mean, what that's doing to stimulating the immune system and potentially creating links between gut health and skin health and neural health. I think the overabundance of antibiotic use, changing gut flora, is playing a role, and I think also what we talked about before with the EMF, the electromagnetic fields,
Right.
and what that's doing to neural migration with the mother who's having a baby in the womb, and even when a baby is born, if they're in that high electromagnetic field or environment, and that brain is rapidly dividing and growing, what kind of impact that's having too. I mean, it's multifactorial.
A couple of things I want to ask you. Nighttime parenting, we used to call it, 40 years ago, yay or nay. Number two, breastfeeding. Do all of your mothers breastfeed?
I would say probably about 75 to 80%, maybe
Good.
a little bit more than that. I think the reason why more mamas don't nurse at the beginning is because they don't have that support at the beginning
Yes.
to encourage them.
Right.
And I think there's kind of a lower threshold in most practices to, okay, your baby's not gaining weight, we need to put you right on formula.
Right.
Instead of really kind of closely following that mom and giving her the right recommendations to potentially nurse, I think could be hugely successful. If I have any mom, who's listening right now, I encourage a lot of pumping with the breast pumps. I've heard from different hospitals that certain people are telling mothers not to pump. I've actually had a couple of mothers who've told me that their midwives have even recommended maybe doing a little bit of breast stimulation even before the baby is born, which kind of primes their body to make milk, that when the baby has arrived, they're already producing some milk. So I think there's some things to make it a much more successful experience.
And again, one of the reasons I love interviewing you is you have so many patients. Every patient represented to me, when I was in clinical nutrition, a thumbprint.
Yes.
They're all different.
Right.
One mother might say, you don't have a schedule of vaccines, I got to find somebody else. Everybody's different. Nighttime parenting, because Ruth and I had to find, and we did, a pediatrician who thought that was okay. Sleeping with your child. Oh, we let him, lay in his room for an hour and cry, and then we said we can't do this. So where's your heart on that?
I really like to encourage families at the beginning to have the child in the room with the parent. I do tell moms, I think mothers never really truly go to sleep.
Right.
They have this extra sense about them where the infant is. Fathers, on the other hand, may have a little bit more difficulty about knowing where baby is in the bed. So now they have these different devices that you can actually put in a bed where it's like kind of raised, and you can lay your infant in there, and so they can still be in the bed with you, but there's no opportunity for any kind of rolling over. And I always encourage mothers when they're nursing, never put your bed up against a wall, because you don't want to have the baby pinned. I'd rather have a baby fall off the bed than get pinned in an area where they can't get out. But in all my years of practicing medicine, I haven't really had any issues with any sort of asphyxiation issues with mothers who are nursing. And it's just natural, Doug. I mean, when you have a mother who's nursing and she's tired, it's inevitable that the baby is going to fall asleep sometimes at the breast. It's just
exactly. And finally, the most important question. You're a football guy. You started out at University of Miami playing football. And while you were there, something happened. And something happened that you aren't going to play with huge guys on a football field. You're going to take care of newborn babies. What happened there?
God had a story, and the story wasn't football. I'm very thankful that my mom, who was a nurse, she kind of talked to me about being a doctor. Again, my whole mind was football. I did very well on the MCAT, which is an entry exam that you have to take to get into medical school. And so as a result of that, I applied to allopathic medical schools. I had no idea what an osteopathic medical school was, but if I did know what it was, I would have been an osteopathic physician, because you learn a different principle of medicine in osteopathic versus the allopathic. And that osteopathic arena really, it emphasizes the musculoskeletal system. Some of the things that maybe even chiropractors or physical therapists do, the doctors who are trained in those osteopathic schools learn some of that. But when you're allopathic, you don't learn any of that.
Right.
But so the story moves forward, and we finish up with medical school, and God had a great story about getting me an Air Force scholarship. Gave my time active duty, but then there at Dyess Air Force Base in Abilene, Texas, and my spiritual father, his name is Henry Flint. he might even be watching this. He prayed for me one day in a post office, and I received the Holy Spirit. And from that day onwards, my life hasn't been the same.
Yeah.
And I even used to preach some on a television ministry in Abilene, Texas, Wildfire Ministries. And so God had a story back when I didn't even know him, and he gave me more clarity to that story as I've been filled with his Spirit. And so the journey after that has just been revelation after revelation about how God wants us to take care of his children.
You are loved. I mean, you are absolutely loved. The way we found you was through Julia and other people. Who is this Dr. Naidoo out here in the Dallas area? And finally, we got him on TV about a year ago and had so many nice compliments on you. Thank you for coming in. If people want more information, Shine, S-H-I-N-E, Pediatrics, plural, Pediatrics?
Pediatrics with us.
.com, the Wellness Center. Thank you for who you are and what you've done. It's amazing. Your story is amazing. Thank you for sharing it.
Thank you, Don.